Hey guys, what is up? AwesomeTheSauce here. Hope you guys are having a great day and welcome to another video. We are going today to be doing the best PvP builds video. Basically, I've been doing a lot of PvP on stream. You guys have been seeing me pouring out that YouTube content. So I thought I would go through what I believe are the best builds, the ones that I've had the most success with. PvP right now is probably harder than it's ever been before. There's all kinds of things to watch out for, but I think where it starts is always going to have to be stats, right? If you lose by 100 HP, there might be a reason you lost by 100 HP. It might not even be that you played bad. So today I thought I would break down what I believe are the best builds for every single school in Wizard101 right now, all 7 schools. I thought we would start on the balance, mainly because I really don't see that many balances out there anymore, because it's, I think, one of the hardest schools in the game. But luckily, I do think that there are a lot of ways that you can approach the school, so at least you can be somewhat unpredictable. Right now, the whole gear setup and the way that I'm going to go about this specific part of the video is based around spells that triple hit. I think that's the big strength right now for balance. So spells like Hydra, spells like Jin, spells like Tribunal Oni, you know, like Chimera, like all of those spells, even Gaze, if you really think about it, it's like a double hit instead of a triple hit. All of these spells have one thing in common. They can really hit around a tower shield in a way that other schools cannot. Even Myth, which has Minotaur, doesn't hit through shields the way that Balance does. So for that reason alone, I've decided in this gear setup video to not prioritize Pierce as much as damage. You're gonna have the full impact of your Pierce through a tower shield if you use a Hydra on 2 of the 3 hits. So it's very nice to get the damage up and honestly just run an infoul, because it's much harder to buff your damage than your Pierce as a Balance wizard. So for that reason alone, I think one of the best pets that you can have is just a triple double pet. Now I have it on a Gobbler Ball just because I really like doing those elemental hits. So, you know, the extra elemental blade and even the balance blade can be very, very clutch. And the Brace Defy, nice little touch to add on to it, but really it's the mighty with the resist and the damage that really makes it good. As far as the rest of the gear, I think resist is too important to give up on a balance. So the Mask of the Exalted one, the Darkmoor hat, is really good. You want the Merciless Boots and the Merciless Athame. I run the Festive Wrapping Paper. If you don't have the crowns, you could totally run the Supreme Hex Staff. You do give up Pip Conserve. I'm running a Fire Talisman because I like using anti-trap counters and anti-shield counters to make overtimes and overtime heals respectively to set up this amazing epic card. And we have the Darkmoor Ring. I'm throwing in a Clockwork Courser again. If you don't have this, you can honestly rock any mount. Right now I do have less than 100% pip chance, so a rock mount might be good. Now right now I'm running the Lovelorn Spirit set of Woe because right now with the wand that gives Pip Conserve, my Pip Conserve is very high, 71%. I can rely on that. So if you're running this, you could probably run this. I'm gonna be honest, the difference between the Duelist Daredevil deck and not having it is honestly only about 8%. But I still think Pip Conserve is so important on a balance that if you just don't have a Pip Conserve wand and you want to rock this, you might just want to make up for it in other ways. Maybe even get rid of a Mighty and put Pip Conserve on a pet. There's a lot of ways to get around it. Now, you might have noticed I did skip the robe here. And the reason is because you have to be very careful about exactly how you go about making your robe here, because if you aren't careful, you will not have enough accuracy. So you need a robe that gives at least 6% accuracy. Now I went through all of my stats for this. I even tried running Dragoon Robe because honestly it's really nice. You wouldn't pip fail. Yes, you give up 5 resist, but you get 3 accuracy, but I was just fizzling a little too much. So if you don't have the spooky robe, you're gonna want accuracy on your pet instead of mighty, so you'd want triple double balance sniper. But if you do have it, then I think this is really nice. You get 21 resist, you get 7 accuracy, you get 7 pip chance. I think the only way I would change the setup, probably, is by changing the robe and putting sniper on the pet. So instead of this robe, I might run, I don't know, maybe a Merciless robe, maybe the Dragoon robe, maybe the Motorist robe, maybe the Turquoise. There's a lot of options there. It's just you simply need to get at least 6 accuracy. So no matter what you switch out the Spooky Carnival suit for, you're gonna have to make a balanced sniper pet. That might be one of the next pets that I make, just triple double balance sniper with Brace Defy. I think that's a really, really good idea, actually. And with that, maybe we'll have an even slightly better setup. I will say this, do not forget the fact that you have triple hits. So getting more damage over Pierce, while it does not make sense for a lot of schools, will always make sense for balance. Literally, you're always better off running an infal with higher damage than a damage aura with lower damage and higher Pierce. You're always better off. There's no way around it. So highly, highly recommend you get as much damage on a pet as possible, and then just try to see how you can make stats that don't let you pit fail or fizzle. That's really it. I found that way through the Spooky Robe and the Regal, Buttercup, Gobbler, Ball pet. There's a lot of ways to do this. Definitely, there isn't a one-size-fits-all for this. Now, I think the Storm is really important to kind of do at the beginning, more or less, of this gear set video, because it really highlights an issue with the most PvP builds in this meta, which is the fact that you're basically almost always giving up Dragoon gear for Merciless gear. And when you do that, you give up a lot of Dragoon set gear bonuses for more damage. And the damage really is nice. The Shat Chance on the Merciless gear, very, very good. But one of the most important gear set bonuses that you do end up giving up is obviously going to be that accuracy. And on a Storm, where you can fizzle a lot, it's a very, very big deal. But there are ways to get around it. So let's talk about what Merciless gear I'm wearing first. I'm wearing the Merciless hat, the Merciless boots, and the Merciless Athame. I think, honestly, this setup can work on every wizard. However, I will say that the harder the hitting your school is, the better this 3-piece Merciless combo will work. Now, I couple that with the Motorist robe, which is just a lot of HP. If you don't have the Motorist robe, I will say this, on a Storm, your stats are going to be quite a bit worse. Very unfortunate that Motorist is so important for low health schools. The other one that I think is kind of decent is the Ancient Persian armor, the 140 version. It's from the Gulcha robe. It's decent. Again, it doesn't compare to the Motorist, but it does give accuracy, which, yes, you're giving up about 500 HP, actually, but you get that accuracy back, so you could get some other stats in return. It's not the worst trade-off. If you're looking for completely non-pay-to-win, Dragoon, but you're giving up 5 resist. I still think they need a better alternative. If you're going completely no packs, no bundle, it's really, really hard for a Storm to actually compete. So the Motorist robe, by far the best robe for Storm. That just is what it is, you know, but the Dragoon robe is probably the next best non-pay-to-win version. I got that Supreme Electric Staff. Now, this is a must-have wand for Storm, you know, man. You get that 9 Pierce, you get that 24 damage. You also get the Storm Wand hits, which are very, very good against set shields. You don't always have a way to break set shields, and honestly, there's no real good overtimes that you can naturally do on a Storm. By far the best one. You could actually get this wand in the old one Scion fight. So if you want to farm for it, that's the best place to do it. What I did was literally just keep refreshing the Bazaar until I got it. I know that sounds absolutely nuts, but that does work. So it's one or the other. You either get lucky with the drop or you get lucky with the Bazaar. Now, the amulet that I run is a Fire Mastery. I think this is one of the best ones, mainly just because of Oni's Forge. Again, when we're talking about Storm struggling with shields, having something that can literally remove a volcanic shield is great. But the reason the Fire Mastery is so nice is that when you remove a volcanic shield on a Storm, you get rid of 2 shields and make 2 overtimes, and you set up the gambit that you want for your Thundering Djinn. Now, this is a very powerful hit. 2230 is the base damage when you get a successful Oni's Forge on. Now, you could actually do 2 Oni's Forges on 2 towers and set this up, or you can just wait for them to Volcanic Shield to do this. Obviously, a Volcanic Shield is just a very, very clean Thundering Djinn setup, but I think this is really nice. You don't have to struggle against set shields. You can actually make them work for you, which is why I think a Fire Mastery, much like the Djinn setup on the Balance, I think it's very, very nice on a Storm. We got the Dark Moraine. You'll see this on every wizard that we see today, and I'm sure you're wondering, Sauce, how do you make up for the accuracy on the Merciless robe? That's where the pet comes in. Now, I have a double accuracy, dealer-proof, brace-defy pet with Armor Breaker. The only talent that I would sub out at all would be the Armor Breaker, because if you look at these stats, right, you get 134 damage. You actually get a lot of resist. You get 51 resist and 35 accuracy. You don't fizzle with this, and you get good pip chance. You get very, very high armor piercing, 40 armor piercing. So, I mean, the stats are really good. With 9,000 HP, Storm can do quite a number on your opponent. Now, obviously, my recommendations are only going to be good for people that play somewhat similar to me. There are other ways you can go about it. One thing that I definitely see a lot of people doing that's very successful is just subbing out the Fire Talisman altogether and running a Dragoon's Shocking Charm. Now, why would you do that? Well, one, you would just simply get rid of the Oni's Forges and Thundering Djinns. You have a much smaller deck, and then you get some 2 very, very good, not just minion killers, very powerful hits. We live in an era where it's very, very hard to really organize your deck. So having a smaller deck with the more pre-enchanted hits basically that you can draw and things that can get rid of minions, I can totally see why people run this. this honestly might be the best thing to do. I still think Oni's Forge is nice because of volcanics, but you could always get rid of them with Elf. You could always get rid of them with Super Flux, right? So this is one thing that I could definitely see myself changing, maybe even soon. I don't know. You sometimes might want to think about getting rid of that Armor Breaker and putting on a Fire Ward instead. So that would be a slightly better pet in every manner of the word. I think Fire is probably the worst matchup for Storm. I don't think you need Fire Ward if you play well, especially if you just use Hidden Shields a lot, but it is a really nice thing, especially when you deck fail, to fall back on. There's a Fire Mastery setup and a completely just normal Storm setup with Fire Ward that I think they both really work very, very well. If you know what you're doing with your stats, you can make a very straightforward setup, very small deck setup if you really need, and you can do very well. It's a very simple strategy, I would say, on a Storm. The only stat that I would say you really aren't getting with any of these setups is Pip Conserve. There's nothing you really need to Pip Conserve on a Storm. I would say the only spell that I use regularly that's odd pips is Catch of the Day and Stormwing. Those are the two that I use. It's whatever, you feel me? Now, I'm gonna speed through this one because Fire is very, very similar to Storm in terms of what you're trying to do. So the basic is the same, right? You want the Merciless Hat, the Merciless Boots, and the Merciless Athame. When you do something like that, it just makes your damage very, very high. Your shad chance very, very high. For Fire, you'll feel these effects even more than Storm, actually. Much like the Storm, we have the Motorist Overcoat just for the HP. Same reason you rock it on the Storm, you rock it on the Fire. You have also the Darkmoor Ring. Very, very similar setup so far. Now, here's where things get a little bit different. I run the White New Year's Noisemaker. Now, you don't have to run this. I like the Pip Conserve on a Fire, mainly because I see myself using more odd pip spells on a Fire than I see myself doing it on a Storm. The spells that come to mind here are spells like, you know, I don't know, there's a lot actually. There's Burning Rampage, there's Blast Off, there's Heffy, there's FFA, I mean, Scion even, right? There's more that you actually end up using, and not to mention your actual Rochambeau's to set up for a Scion. Let's say that you're not big on the Scions or the 3-pip spells that you know, use to manipulate shields and traps, then obviously you could run the Supreme Volcanic Staff. Now, I actually don't have the Pierce version, believe it or not. I just don't have it, but, you know, just like the Supreme Electric Staff, there's a version that gives Pierce instead of, I don't know, like Crit or Pip Conserve or something. Basically, you can run that. It gives a lot of Pierce. I simply think that, yeah, you might be giving up like one stat, like 1 Pierce and 1 damage, but you're getting 250 Pip Conserve, which is why I like the White New Year's Noisemaker so much. I run an Ice Talisman on this guy because when you can remove traps and shields very easily, what's remaining are blades and weaknesses, and that's what Ice does. Or even on a Death, sometimes they weakness you a lot for Monster Mash setups or Scion setups, or just Grim Reader, right? They just do it a lot. You might want to have these just as a nice little way to get rid of it. You guys might see me with 10,000 HP on my Fire. That's because I'm an idiot, and I often don't run in with the Duelist Main Care deck. I run in with this deck because it gives HP, crit, and Pip Conserve. I'm literally giving out block for 119 HP, which is stupid because a block will save me more than that. But if you want to be steezy and say you have 10,000, then yeah, you can run this deck. You can get in the Bazaar. Kind of stupid if you ask me. And honestly, the Pip Conserve is a little bit less. So, I mean, you know, do what you want. It's not a big deal. As far as the pet, I run an Armor Breaker Fire Sniper pet, unlike Storm, because you literally have 5 extra accuracy on all your pets. You actually, on all of your spells, you don't need the extra, you know, extra fire shot or whatever it is, or sharp shot, I guess, is what I use on my Storm. You don't need it. So instead of that, I just have an extra giver and just get a little bit more damage. Let's move on to Ice. Now, I have 2 setups here for you guys because I'm just such an overachiever. Now, one of them, unfortunately, is so pay to win that I'm not really sure why it belongs in a gear guide. So let's start off with the one that's much more accessible. So one setup that you can do is just run the Merciless Hat. This is a crafted version. You can run the Merciless Boots and the Merciless Athame, right? But you can throw in the Dragoon Robe because Ice actually has a really, really nice Dragoon set. And what you could do added on to that is just, you know, rock a Pip Conserve wand. You could rock a Balance Talisman, so you can use this spell quite a bit, and you can literally just reshuffle and never die to a Trap Stacker, like, ever. You'll still have the Darkmoor Ring and the Clockwork Courser. The difference is your pet, you can actually, you know, kind of like finagle around with it, because you don't necessarily, in my opinion, need accuracy. Now, here's the thing. in a perfect world, I would probably replace this bulwark with a sniper so that I have double damage, armor breaker, double resist with brace defy on a blimp. Now, this blimp is very overpowered. It gives 2 Balefrost for 35. You won't lose bubble control if you don't want to with this setup. It's really easy to play with, you feel me? And honestly, you get 55 resist, even with a hat that doesn't give resist, which is really nice too. So I mean, if you want to play a glass cannon ice setup, it's actually much easier than people think that it is. I will say this, I have currently a Storm Pierce jewel on this, and currently a 7% accuracy thing on this. If we were to finagle the stats and add 6 Pierce, right, to here, I'd have 32 Pierce with 127 damage, which is more than enough. I'd also have perfect pip chance for 7 less accuracy, which puts me at around 23, which is a little bit low. If you had a perfect accurate Sapphire, you'd be at 24, which I'm gonna be honest, you're really not gonna fit. Like, the only thing you might fizzle 1% of the time is on a bomb, which I just don't think is a big deal. You could honestly have even more damage. You could have triple, double armor breaker if you really want. And instead of 127, you could have 133 damage on an ice with this much HP and this much resist. Ice kind of doesn't have to worry about stats at all. But I do think that in a meta where you just trade hits a lot, it's kind of hard to do. Like, you don't really get that much HP for the damage that you're actually able to do. So I've come up with a totally different setup with the help from other people, seeing what other people have done. And what I've decided to do instead is literally just like flip the script. And what I have is this pet that actually just works off of storm damage instead. So you make a gear set pet, right? Which, if you didn't know, this gear set pet, when you have the mount and the pet, it literally gives an extra 6% or 5% damage. Very nice. You put on the brace defy, right? And basically, you keep the ring with the Storm Pierce, I guess. What I've been running is a Storm Mastery to really hit as a storm on an ice. And to really make everything work, you need the Dark Mode thing, because it actually gives a lot of pip chance. And you lose a lot of pip chance when you're trying to run a lot of accuracy on both your deck and your Athame. You still keep the wand because it gives storm and ice damage. And here's where it gets a little pay to win, unfortunately. In order to do this, you need the Motorist Overcoat. I've been running a creepy clown mask, and then you also, I've been using a Forge Master's boots. When you run this setup, you actually have very high HP, but you actually have storm stats. You have 129 damage on an ice. You have 10.5 KHP, you have 36 accuracy, and you still have 31 Pierce, decent block, very good pip chance. Very good pip conserve for anything that you want to do that's odd pips, like Frostbite or Steel Ward. And if you have the resources, you can literally get training points. You can literally train storm hits. You can run Rusalka TCs, Wild Bolt TCs, Storm Beetle TCs, Storm Man, and you can basically run a hybrid setup. Now here's the thing, I'm currently doing this on a Storm. I'd say the Storm one is the hardest one to do because of the accuracy issue, right? You technically don't need a sharp shot on your pet at all if you're running some other masteries. So I think Ice is in a really weird spot where, because their damage is so low, running a glass cannon hat just makes it hard to keep up with the damage output of your opponent. So instead of struggling with that, you can always just run other stats and just use your pip conserve Steel Wards, your pip conserve on your Frostbites, along with high damage to an off school, and just do a lot of damage. I think this could work with fire or myth. I'm still experimenting, but I am saying that there's an avenue for this if you're frustrated with Ice. It is unfortunately a little pay to win at the moment. I think off-school setups on an Ice are very viable just because you're naturally high HP. That's kind of where I'm at with Ice. I mean, I don't know if it's the best gear setup, but it's very fun to play with, so I had to include it in this video, especially because a lot of people have been asking about specifically this gear setup. Let's move on to the Life Wizard, another try-hard. I think Life has the same issues that we just talked about with Ice, which is when you run a glass cannon setup, yes, you can do a lot of damage with your naturally higher HP, but every other school is going to outdo you. The good thing is, Life can actually heal. So you got to make sure your damage is high. Try to get your resist up to some tankable way. And also make sure that your healing is high so you can make up for all the damage that you lose every time you trade. There are two ways to go about this. One of them is pay to win. The other one, maybe not so much. The one thing that you could honestly just do is run your resist hat. I really recommend the Merciless Robe, actually, because it just gives a lot of HP, a lot of pip chance. It really fills in a lot of stats. Yes, compared to the Dragoon Robe, you're giving up Pierce, but I don't know. I just feel like the damage that you get from the Pierce. It's just not worth it over the 2 resist. You also get 19 outgoing. I don't know, man. The HP, I just feel like it slightly is a little bit better. Obviously, both of these are usable in my opinion. Then you run the Merciless Boots and the Athame. I'm running the Supreme Life Force Staff as an example of a non-pay-to-win setup. And obviously, you know, you have the Darkmoor Ring. You want a pet that just gives a lot of damage, a lot of resist, a lot of Pierce. You want to make sure those stats are good, right? And then really go back on your healing. And you can run, honestly, anything. I have this deck with an incoming jewel. You can run the Duelist Make Care deck. You can run a lot. I think with this specific setup, because my accuracy is literally non-existent, I would 100% run this, you know, man? So you'd have a 1% chance of fizzling. You'd have very high HP, very high damage, and very high resist. You will notice that my healing is 35 in, 35 out. It's not terrible. That's with a couple of incoming jewels here and there. I will say this, if you have healing around here, you're going to want to really rely on Luminous quite a bit. The thing about Luminous is that it does a decent bit of damage, but the key is the weakness makes it so that if someone hits back, they're not going to hit back as hard. You have 2 options. Either you weakness them with your hit, or you heal off the damage of their hit. Now, my other setup involves bundle gear. So what I run as something that's very, very heal oriented, I run the Arcane Smith's Cap, which does not give any pip chance, but it actually gives good healing. It gives pierce damage and resist. And I also run the Arbalaster 3000 with healing jewels in, which makes my healing even more insane. And to make up for the pip chance, I run the Darkmoor Athame. Now, the Darkmoor Athame, you could run it on any setup. And honestly, instead of using, I don't know, the extra pip chance on a pip jewel, you could use it on an item card. Maybe there's an item card that you've been dying to use. So this could still work in other setups. I run the Myth Mastery on every setup that I do, and everything else is similar, right? And what you will notice is that when I have this on, right, I actually have very, very high healing. I have 56 in, 56 out with a little bit less HP. Now, I think the setup seems like it doesn't work, but it works, in my opinion, very, very well. You still have very, very high damage for life. You have 35 Pierce because of the hat, giving that extra Pierce. And your Boulets and your Satyrs are going to do an obscene amount of damage with or without a Sanctuary. So you have 2 options, really, in my opinion, as a life. Either go high damage and high resist, not really worry about healing. Maybe throw in a Brûlée here and there, but really focus on the Luminouses for your trades. Or you run high damage, high healing with, by the way, decent resist. I think this actually does work very well in the resist area. And basically try to heal. You will run into issues if you're over-reliant on healing with people that pack infections. This is not an airtight build, but it's just, you know, for the gear setup video, I need to put this in so you guys can see how far a healing setup truly can go. Now, the death follows the exact same pattern as everything that you've seen up to this point. And honestly, this seems to work on a lot of schools. You might have noticed. Merciless Hat, Merciless Boots, Merciless Athame. You run the Motorist. And much like the Storm, because I don't think Pip Conserve is as important, because a lot of your big hits are even. You know, your Rate, your Hit and Bubble, your Grim Reader if you really get it to 6 or 4 pips, right? Your Poisons, they're all even pip. Pip Conserve, not as important on a death. But because of that, I run the Supreme Staff, which doesn't give pip conserve, but gives really good stats. These Wandits are very, very nice, by the way. They do a lot of damage, and set shields are kind of hard for a death to deal with few pips. So this is a really good way to deal with that. Now, there's 2 different ways you can go about Mastery Amulets, in my opinion. I think Balance Mastery is great just because of shifting the scales. It's just a really good anti-trap stack, and you can reshuffle easily, which is kind of nice if you're really trying to get Bubble Control and Drain. Recently, I've been running a Myth Mastery, mainly because you can really catch people off guard with the Medusa. Earthquake is very nice against Blade Stack strategies where you cannot keep up with your Putrefactions. These Putrefactions are great, but if someone's Elemental Blades and they're trying to set up a Scion, or Spirit Blades, or trying to set up a Jinn, I feel like these don't do much. So I feel like just having an Earthquake, sometimes it's a very, very nice thing to have. Now, I do something a little different on this wizard, which is on my pet. I actually run D-Lance, so I get a little bit of extra pip chance on the pet. And if you're wondering about the choice of wards, I'm very drain reliant on a death, and I feel like warding against schools that can do more damage to you is generally a good idea on a death. So, you know, your Rate, it's going to be very effective against people that can't do that much damage because you're doing damage and healing back. But a Wraith is not going to do, it's not going to do anything against a Triton. It's not going to do anything against a Rusalka. It's not going to do anything against an Inferno Salamander. So you basically run a hat that doesn't give resist, but you run wards that make your resist much higher for those schools that can do a lot of damage. You'll have pretty even matchups against Fire and Storm still, so it makes for a fun setup, and you retain your very, very high damage. With a Clockwork Courser, you're looking at 32 Pierce, very high block. What's nice when you have that extra D-Lance is that you actually, you know, if you run a 15% accuracy jewel like me, you only have a 1% chance of fizzling anything, and you still have 96% pip chance with the D-Lance Jewel. So I actually just run item cards. I haven't figured out one that really works. Right now, I'm trying to figure out a Mandar setup just for fun. I put D-Shift on before. There's a lot of things you could really do. You know, you could run a Frenzy Mandar if you really want. I don't know, you can run anything. There's a lot of item cards that are very, very good in this game that you can put, and most people don't do it because they just want a pip chance and an accuracy. But there are ways to get around that with things like D-Lance, with a rock mount, for example. There are ways to get around it. So definitely, I recommend, you know, if you don't have a D-Lance Jewel, maybe a rock mount. If you don't have a rock mount, honestly, maybe even, like, you know, a Darkmoor thing. There's a lot of ways to get pip chance back to get an extra jewel if you're trying to run a fun strategy. Not everyone does it, but I recommend it. It's fun. I think myth is really straightforward, except for the choice of mastery. So let's talk about what I do on the myth. All right, so what I do, I run the Merciless hat, the Merciless boots, and the Merciless, oh wow, what a surprise. Still run the Motorist overcoat. Now, this is where it gets a little different. I actually really like the idea of Delusion and Betrayal to get rid of a weakness or a shield and make blades or traps or whatever, traps to buffs. So basically, the pip conserve is really important. So I run a pip conserve wand, and I also run pip conserve, you know, on an amulet, and that actually gives you quite a bit, right? That gives you a 70% chance of pip conserving. And I still run the Darkmoor deck with it, so I have a lot of sideboard space to work around with. As far as the actual pet, I feel like this is where, you know, you can get a little creative, but here's the thing. You're running a glass cannon hat. It probably helps to have, you know, ward against fire, so that's why I have it. You're making up for the accuracy just like Fire and Storm. This is the other school that I think really does need to do it. I guess Ice does too, but I don't know. Something about Myth, I just feel like you need it more. Now, the big difference is a Mastery Amulet. Now, I've seen people run both a Fire Mastery and a Death Mastery. I think the Death Mastery is slightly better in a lot of ways. There's really a good reason for this, right? Your Rochambeaus cover weaknesses and shields, so what's really remaining are traps and blades. Now, what's cool about Myth is that they can still actually do something about it, right? You can Earthquake blades off, and you can actually Dimension Shift. If you have this with a minion out, you can get rid of traps as well. I find Earthquake a little easier to set up than a D-Shift because you really need a minion out for this to work because it literally requires a minion to get rid of the traps. So that's why I run a Fire Mastery. And what's kind of nice is if you can backfire the traps off, you actually put on 2 overtimes and you can set up an Oni. Now, this is very hard to do, but that's basically why I run a Fire Mastery. It's a very small thing. Since you really, just like Storm, you don't really need it, you can actually run the Dragoon's Mythic Charm and just run Earthquake and D-Shift and not really clog your deck with this or this. And I think that's a very valid way to play Myth. And I honestly recommend you play it like that if you don't like the Rochambeau spells. I think Myth and Storm are probably the best candidates for not running a Mastery Amulet whatsoever in this meta. The only thing I don't like about the setup is that the armor pierce is low. So what I might do, because of, I mean, I don't know, I might do this. I might recreate these stats on a Maple Moose. And I currently am using, you know, a Fossil Avenger set bonus that gives me 6 extra damage with the mount that I have, but I might just switch over to the, you know, to the Clockwork Courser, get 2 extra pierce, and yeah, I'd lose like 6 damage, but it wouldn't be the worst because the Maple Moose gives good traps. So I might do that. 130 damage with 34 pierce might be better than 136 damage with 32. But yeah, guys, that is my video on literally every school. This is what I currently run. This is what I've had success with. Let me know if you guys want me to make more guides like this. I might do a video separately on deck setups. I'm still learning the wave. I literally just got to Warlord on everybody, so I thought I'd wait until I at least did that. As always, drop a like for more content, man. Drop a sub if you're new. And if somebody has not told you you're awesome today, I hope this video helped. Straight up. Somebody has not told you you're awesome today. They doing something wrong. So stay awesome. And yeah.